Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Parsons. I'm one of your co-hosts for the Thoughtworks Technology Podcast, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Ken.
Hi, I'm Ken McGrage. I'm one of the other regular hosts of the podcast.
And we're joined by two of our colleagues who have been involved in a fascinating project that we'll be talking about. So the first one is Vinod.
Hi, good to be here. I'm Vinod. I lead our digital public goods infrastructure work out of Thoughtworks India.
And Prathamesh.
Hi, I'm Prathamesh Kalamkar. I'm a lead data scientist at Thoughtworks India. Glad to be here. Thank you.
So the project that we want to talk about is kind of an umbrella project called Jugalbandi. And first, I want to congratulate you all on the fact that this has been accepted into the Digital Public Goods Alliance. That's something that we are quite excited about. But can you tell us what Jugalbandi is about, where the name came from, and how this piece of work has come about?
Hi. So the name is very interesting. The name originates from actually Indian classical music. So Indian classical music, we have this concept that two artists are playing together, and they're lead artist, like not one on the percussion, but there are two artists, and then they're playing some thoughts. That's what we call as khayal gayaki. And so that if you take that concept, that if your two artists are talking to each other, it's similarly in Jugalbandi, we have multiple AI systems talking to each other, right? So you have a lot of speech models coming in, from speech to text translation and from text to speech again. And again, you have LLMs on the other side, and you have multiple search engines. So there are multiple AI components that are talking to each other. And that's the real meaning of Jugalbandi, that there are multiple AI systems talking together, creating a beautiful symphony out of it. So that's where the name came in from. Yeah. And so when this project started, this was initially conceptualized to be a government welfare schemes chatbot. That means where an ordinary citizens can just talk to this bot in their own native language and get their responses back, so that even illiterate people can get access to this information. And that's the central theme behind Jugalbandi. So it's a suite of solution which breaks at one important thing, that is breaking barriers to information access, and that it does leveraging the state-of-the-art AI systems. That's when the name and the concept comes from.
Excellent. And let's take those pieces and talk about them separately. So tell me a little bit more about this speech to text translation, because I understand that it's one of the very few systems that exist supporting many of the non-English languages on the Indian subcontinent.
So this whole project started actually at Thoughtworks itself. So we started with this project called as Vakyansh, which wherein we tried to develop models in initial few Indian languages, which can do speech to text conversion, and then doing a translation from one Indian languages to multiple other. And then after that, the Ministry of Electronics and IT of Government of India came over and then took over that project, and then made it into an offering which is called as Bhashini. And they are hosting some of these models that we are currently consuming, which can do lots of these things, starting from speech to text, text to speech, translation. So they are hosting these models and making it available in form of APIs, which we are consuming. So Bhashini is currently hosted at Government of India, and we are the main users, or we are advocating users of Bhashini through a lot of building these applications.
So Prathamesh, the advent of Vakyansh itself is actually a fascinating story. When we started Vakyansh, we did not know that in 2.5 years we will have 22 languages with the level of precision that can rival anything across the world. When we started, the going standard was for someone to get a speech to text with a level of precision that is acceptable. It would take 1.5 years. our team was able to bring that down to 1 week. So, now our team can actually create a new speech to text for any language within 1 week, given, of course, the data is made available. And there were so many breakthroughs that happened through that journey. That's probably for another discussion, but that itself is a fascinating story. And Vakyansh also is a digital public good.
What percentage of the Indian population do you think is currently covered now by the 22 languages that you do support?
So the 22 languages are definitely the major languages that all of India uses. Of course, India has about 800 dialects, but these 22 languages are, I would think they should be covering more than 80% of the Indian population today. Or I can put it the other way. I would say most of the people in India would know at least one of these 22 languages.
So if I might, a question, can you give me just like a person in India wants to discover a government scheme? What's that interaction look like? Describe to folks what they're actually doing with the government chatbot?
So earlier it was mainly happening through offline medium of communications, that is through printed media or maybe something on newspaper, on television, or through the service centers. That is a very effective way of propagating this information. But again, like that had issues in terms of like sometimes they used to get inadequate information. They didn't have ability to search that, okay, this is fine, but how would I make sure that in my case, whether I'm eligible or for my need, how do I go and make sure that this information is actually relevant to me, right? So there used to be even these intermediaries who used to charge money just to give this information. And there was a recent news article that was published, and the title said that here is a chatbot that doesn't take money to give you the right information, right? So it's that kind of value proposition that you actually have a chatbot that you can talk to in your own language, describe your need in your own language, right? Because if you go to a government office or a service center, they will ask you very technical questions, and people get scared, right? I don't understand what is this. Even I don't understand these terminologies. So how do I get the right information? So we try to break that using, like, you ask your question in your natural language, the way you use it in daily lives, and then it will do all the translation at the back end. It will search for the right keywords and come up with the right kind of schemes that are available, and even explain to you some of these keywords that people struggle to understand. And then like if some of people understand it, then it can use those contexts. But for certain people who don't understand those terms at all, it can even simplify, okay, this is the meaning of it. So as you kind of keep on asking it more and more clarification, it will kind of give you that and then bring it back to the original flow that they're supposed to have. So it's kind of that way that you can talk to it in your own language.
So if I may, just to be explicit, for listeners that aren't maybe aware of Jugalbandi, it's doing this in audio, right? It's speaking to the person. It's not defining it on their phone where they can't, maybe not literacy, they can't read it anyway.
Correct. Yeah. So it's actually a WhatsApp chatbot. So one of the interesting things in India is penetration of WhatsApp is surprisingly high, right? So even if you go to the villages with the advent of all the smartphones and as well as the connectivity and 4G and 5G networks, you'll be surprised to see that people are using WhatsApp as primary mode of communication. And the simplicity, they're used to it, because if you want to talk to someone, I will just go on to WhatsApp, press or record a voice note and send it to it. It's so much easier than just typing in there and doing something in English or maybe in their own language. Typing is difficult. So they're very much used to conversing in this format of doing sending voice notes. And we thought that the most effective way of reaching the bottom of the pyramid is through this channel.
Excellent. So can you tell me a little bit more about that back end piece? We've talked so far mostly about, the speech to text and text to speech and such. And you alluded to, yes, we find the keyword and we look things up. And can you tell me a little bit more about how that back end works for this government scheme and in terms of getting the right information to them and following on that flow that you were talking about?
Right. Yeah. So this whole flow is orchestrated using something that we call as a finite state machine. That means we track the user state using multiple finite states. And as the conversation moves on, the user conversation moves from one state to another, right? And these transitions from one state to another is where we are actually using OpenAI large language models. So that is one thing. And the other one is also for doing the right search. That means, like, given the information that you're looking for, how do you make sure that that you search for the right schemes? So for there, what we had done is, like, we scraped the information from Indian government website, and they keep on updating this website on a regular basis. So we scrape that information, we take that, we pass them through something which is known as embedding models, and then store those vectors, right? And when the user query comes, we try to do a semantic search. That means, like, it's not a keyword based search, but it's a meaning based search, because many times the words that are used maybe on a government website versus what people are using can be very, very different, but semantically they mean the same thing, right? So it's important to do this semantic search. So nowadays embedding models are getting better at embedding the meanings or encoding the meaning. So we do that kind of search and then fetch the right information, that, okay, based on your thing, this looks like, okay, we believe that these schemes are look relevant to you, or even ask a probing question that it looks like your search is too vague. Maybe can you narrow down that, okay, what kind of information you're looking for, right? So it kind of does that kind of clarification, and then it gives user, okay, we believe that these are maybe 5 most interesting government welfare schemes as per your need, and it gives us a one-line summary of each one of them, and then tells it, okay, which one you want to know more about. And that's when the state transition happened, that from a searching, you're moving now to the detailing, that you're going into specifics of one particular welfare scheme. And then that's where the transition happens in the finite state machine. It gets more details about, okay, now what is your eligibility criteria? What benefits does it provide? What documents are needed, etc. So it does that back and forth conversation, and then gives back replies in the native language. So this is how the flow kind of is structured.
So we hear a lot about large language models and hallucinations. Obviously, given your target audience, the level of frustration that might come from, wait a minute, why are you telling me this bizarre thing? How have you handled that hallucination problem?
So basically, to answer your question, right, hallucinations is definitely a very important problem, and the most practical hindrance in terms of adoption of LLM. So literature has shown that using retriever augmented generation is an effective way to control hallucinations, right? So what we do is we tell LLM that, hey, there are 2 sources for knowledge for an LLM. One is the parametric knowledge. That means whatever it has learned from internet during the pre-training time. That's one knowledge source. And the other knowledge source is what you give it as an information in the input prompt. So people think that prompts are only supposed to be meant for asking questions. That's not correct. Actually, you can also give it a lot of information into that which fits in that window, and then ask that using this particular information, can you answer me the question? So that's the crux of RAG. And post RAG, what we have done is we have created 6 layers in which each of these concepts are formalized. So it starts from UI layer, then it speech handling layer, then how do you plan for what information is needed to answer a query, actually getting that information, putting it into the LLM and getting the answer back. So there are these 6 layers that we have formalized in post-RAG architecture. But essentially, how do you control hallucinations is 2-3 things. First is using RAGs, and second one is using right prompt engineering, saying that you should draw the knowledge boundary very clearly, because for most of the practical applications, you would want LLMs to focus on certain types of problem, right? You don't want answer for anything under the sun, right? So you'd want very like, let's say you are working in retail, and you see your just your domain. If you're working in, for example, in fashion world, it's just about what's the latest trends, etc. So every like chatbot or a customer facing application will have that boundary, and it's very important to draw that boundary using prompt engineering, so that if anything outside that comes, it should politely say that, hey, I don't know this, instead of trying to answer that, right? So that those are the 2-3 things that effectively reduce hallucinations.
Excellent.
So, if I may, Rebecca, it's also interesting in terms of the risks that you perceive with regards to hallucination and the use cases that you start adopting. So, while Jugalbandi for schemes and benefits is one, we also got a request from one of the law enforcement personnel of a state to uh, to adopt this technology for helping women and girls who are undergoing harassment. So the risk the risk associated of hallucination on the second is much larger. If you give the wrong answer about a government scheme, they go check, they got the wrong scheme, they come back, it's perhaps a few hours wasted. But in the second case, the case of harassment, if you give the wrong answer, it could be a matter of life and death. So, so we are sort of navigating through those aspects as well, in terms of, what is acceptable in this type of use case and what is not acceptable in a different type of use case.
That actually leads nicely to my next question, which is, what are some of the other applications other than the government schemes application that you have already implemented or are looking to implement under this Jugalbandi architecture?
So we started off with this government schemes chatbot, but we soon realized that it has potential to be used elsewhere, right? And one of the things that we felt immediately was that, hey, now that you have a chatbot working on schemes, is it possible that I can, instead of schemes, let's say I put my own documents, right? So can I swap out that scraped information about schemes and then plug it back with my own information, which could be like anything, right? That's specific to my domain, right? And then you have a chatbot working on top of it. And that's where we created a solutioning called as generic question and answering, which says that talk to your own documents. And it's the concept is essentially the same, that you upload a corpus of your own documents, and then basically you again index it, store it somewhere, and then you can do a conversation using on those documents. So this while on top level it looks very simple, but I think it breaks barrier to innovation for a lot of players, especially in social sector, because they don't have a technical capacity in house to kind of build such things. That while at a high level everyone is talking about chat GPT, etc., but they were under constant questioning that how can you make the answers more authentic, or make them condition those answers based on certain type of data that I wanted to look at. So, and then that's where it helped them. So it immediately acted as a starting point, as an innovation trigger for a lot of people to just quickly come and then put those documents, and we created an API on top of it. Everything was self-hosted, and it acted as a starting kit for anyone who wants to create a chatbot. And then this became an instant hit. Like we tried this in multiple places. A lot of NGOs showed interest. Actually, Bandhu is one of a great example of that they have created a chatbot using this starter kit. So basically their problem statement was, how do you help migrant workers in India who migrate from the villages to the cities to find the right shelter, right? Because many of time these shelters for blue collared workers are not listed. So they have created something which acts as a listing for such blue collar workers. So this became an instant application of such thing, wherein they took Jugalbandi question and answering as a starting kit, uploaded their own data into it, and then built a chatbot for them in matter of couple of weeks, right? And then now they have taken it forward and then built more sophistication on top of it. But these offerings really act as a starting point for a lot of such innovation use cases. So that was one. Then we took it to even courts, Indian courts. They had very specific requirements in terms of they wanted to search for the right information, but they didn't want any paraphrasing aspect. That means I just want to get the answer as is. So we did some changes to them. How do you make sure that the right information reaches, and at the same time it's traced back to the original source? Because while an ordinary citizen is, or he wants paraphrasing, on the other side of the spectrum are judges who says that, okay, I don't want to answer, I want to trace it back to the original source from which it came. So we built something for them where you can actually trace back the answer to the original thing, and that doesn't paraphrase too much, and use the actual language that was used in the original document. A lot of these spectrum was quite large on this, and we mainly have, even though we have a lot of adapters from social sectors, NGOs, but also now we're working very closely with Umang. That is one of the app that we have under ministry, government ministry, wherein they have a lot of APIs that are integrated into the Umang. And now they're adding one more feature to Umang, which says that talk to government, not just government schemes, but talk to a lot of other government offerings that are there. So one of those things that we're seeing is push this all of government towards citizen, using technologies like this to make it more accessible.
So just to explain, Umang is almost like the super app of the government of India, where they try to bring all features that citizens need to interact with the government. It could be about your driving license, it could be about your power, it could be about your school, hospital, it could be about any of those things, right? So this is supposed to be a portal from where you can go and get all those benefits, and they are now looking to integrate this chatbot into that, which I think is incredible.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm curious, of course, the AI space and generative AI, et cetera, is kind of fast moving. I think people probably have noticed. And also you talk about the demand here. Are there strategies you've taken from an architecture perspective or from a rollout perspective to make up for that? That okay, it's a very, very fast moving technology. Demand is very fast moving. Next week's not going to be the same as last week. Are there strategies, or are you just kind of rolling with it, or what are you thinking about there?
When we started, right, we just were like following the trend, and okay, new models are coming up every week. Maybe new methods are being discovered of writing prompts. How do you cope up with this? So I think initially when we started, we were just following the trend, keeping an eye on what's happening, integrating that into what we can build. But I think then later on we felt a need that, okay, there is a need to formalize some of the learnings that are coming up consistently. And that's where we came up with this post-track architecture, where some of the very common needs are being actually documented, right? So the common patterns that we saw across. So for example, people constantly were struggling with having leaking of sensitive information outside organization boundaries, right? So that's one of a very common example. So the data privacy layer in post-track kind of tries to handle that. So just like we try to create guardrails in terms of what information should go in, go out, or go where, or not just that. Like a common pattern that we have seen is that you need to understand that LLM can't do everything on their own. They need to pick and choose right tools for right set of tasks, right? Obviously they're good at certain things like reasoning, having conversations, etc. But let's say you want to do something else, then there are specialized tool. If they can do it, then should be a provision that it should be like you should call that tool rather than doing that thing on your own. So we kind of provision that using the data planning layer, wherein it's plug and play. So we try to formalize our learnings in that architecture. But yeah, and it's, as you said, like it's a constantly moving space, and we're trying to.
So if I may add, I just wanted to, Prathamesh, take you back to maybe about 10 months when OpenAI suddenly became big, and Prathamesh and I were having this discussion, and Prathamesh, you were saying, I don't know what I'm going to do, because over the last 12 years I've been sort of specializing in something, and suddenly this has come. And then we discussed and we said, hey, if you can't fight it, join it. so we sort of pivoted and we said, hey, rather than saying, everything that we've done so far is perhaps irrelevant. Let's see what we can do by adopting LLM. And it's actually interesting because I think OpenAI sort of became more visible last November. And by March, Jugalbandi was out, and perhaps one of the most visible application that used LLM out there. So I think we were pretty good with moving with the flow. Of course, it's evolving, but it's rapidly evolving. I think we are just trying to stay along with it.
Excellent. So I mentioned at the beginning that this was accepted into the Digital Public Goods Alliance. Can you tell me a little bit about what that means and some other activities we have surrounding that alliance?
So the digital public goods are essentially software, content, protocols that are aimed at supporting the 17 sustainable development goals that United Nations has. Right. So that's the broad theme. But one very key aspect of a digital public good is that it is open source. So so this alliance is a body of several organizations, including United Nations and other foundations, even countries today. India, for example, is one of the alliance members, etc. And Thoughtworks is the only IT services company who's been invited to be part of the alliance. So we are very proud and privileged to be in that group. The reason why we were invited was because out of the about 150 certified digital public goods out there, when we counted, we realized that we have contributed to about 14 of those. About 9% of the entire digital public goods that are out there, we've had a role to play. And of course, we've been nurturing two, which is Bamni and Cloud Carbon Footprint. So that's sort of Thoughtworks' association with the Digital Public Goods Alliance. And I think Vakyansh, Bamni, Cloud Carbon Footprint, there are a number of digital public goods that we have worked with. And it's actually a mark of, it is definitely a matter of, it's humbling as well and matter of privilege, because some of these solutions that we work on help people at scale and make benefit the last person standing on the line, in a matter of speaking. And while a lot of these digital, for example, Bamni is very focused on health, and so you can look at it from that domain. But something like Vakyansh or something like even Jugalbandi in this case, so they are domain agnostic. So I can now use Vakyansh for health, for justice, for finance, for education. I can use any of these tools across the board. And so that's where we are also seeing a lot of innovation. So there is this concept called combinatorial innovation. So Prathamesh spoke about Jugalbandi from the concept of saying, hey, we've got different AI models talking to each other and providing this. So that's the technology space. But you can also look at innovation happening where, you have a Vakyansh or a Bhashini that you can then combine with something like Bamni. Bamni is a health product where doctors, rather than having to type and give notes for patients, can just speak, and then the notes are taken automatically. So then you just increase the productivity of doctors that much more. So this concept of combinatorial innovation is starting to really take off. And we are very happy that we are bang in the midst of all that exciting work.
So what comes next? Are you just mostly waiting for requests to come in? I mean, I think this whole concept of talk to your documents, for example, has such potential for knowledge management and many other things. But I'm interested in where you two see this going.
So first, I think we get many requests for this every week. Actually, we are getting so many requests that the current Jugalbandi team is no longer able to address all of this, right? So we thought of there should be another Jugalbandi, that how do you use Jugalbandi? So something like that. But but the essential thing is that Jugalbandi is already open source and people can use it. But the main pain points that we see is they don't have technology capacity to kind of implement those, right? So how do you move from a point of current point where you need to have some technical capacity in house to more like a low code or one click deployment kind of solution? That's what we are working one area. The other one is looking at some very big implementations which are citizen scale. So one that I spoke about is Umang. The other one is Department of Justice. So these are two very big implementations that we currently have in place, which will use Jugalbandi as a starting point, and then they really take them to the citizen scale. So those are the areas. Apart from that, we are also continuously changing how Jugalbandi is implemented, because now with all these latest changes, trends that we see, the architecture behind Jugalbandi needs a lot of changes. So how do you keep up with those? How do you make it work better? So that's something that we are continuously improving on.
Could you also talk about the G20 session and what was being demonstrated there in G20?
So we were invited at G20 to talk about, hey, why don't you talk about what we have already built and show it to people across the globe. So this year G20 happened in India, New Delhi. And basically the objective was, can you create a chatbot around G20 thing, or like all the information or all the things that are happening at G20. So what had really happened was, like, all the ingested documents were all the tracks that are there in G20. What are the conclusions that were drawn? Or what are the discussion points, etc. What are the trends, etc. And then we ingested those documents, and in just less than three days, we were up with a running bot on which you could talk to in your own language about what's happening at G20, etc., and all the information related to that. So that was seen as a big success. We had international media, and then even Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina showed a keen interest in implementing this in Bangladesh. And the team have contacted us, and then we are following up with them. And the Bangladesh government is really keen to implement this at their own level, similar to what we have done. They want to implement a schemes bot in Bangladesh. So that was a key takeaway for us.
So it's very interesting to see that in places where people are not digital natives, the government or the tech community there are actually making rapid strides, use some of these technologies like AI, so that the non-digital natives, so to speak, are now able to start accessing a lot of these digital capabilities. And it's a bit like, people in the LMIS countries, they never had a wired phone. They just directly went to the mobile phone because it was much easier to just set up mobile phone towers and then get everyone a phone rather than put all these wires. So I definitely see that deep tech is starting to get utilized a lot more in in the global south now, and the sophistication of technologies that are occurring here are definitely something that I think the entire world should watch out. We've had conversations with several other some of our colleagues in other countries as well about some of these technologies, including Jugalbandi and Vakyansh. And they are definitely keen to see how some of these can be adopted. The good thing is these are all open source. And so there is really no barriers to adoption. And I think it will be really interesting for people across the world, the international population, to start looking at some of these technical tools that are being put out as open source and see how that can be adopted and utilized.
Yeah. And I just want to summarize this. Like, someone said this to me, which is very apt, that 2023 was a year where prototypes were being built, and the next year, 24, is the year when it will actually be deployed on ground. So that's what we see even for us, that there will be so many implementations and then the rubber hitting the road, and then lots of things happening. So we are excited to see all of that happening.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Vinod. Thank you, Prathamesh. And thank you, Ken. It's, as I said, again, congratulations on the Digital Public Goods Alliance. That's somewhat old news, but I think it's still worthwhile highlighting that. And I look forward to a bright future of knowledge management and talking to my documents, and maybe we can sort out some of the speech to text features of some products that we all know and love. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.